Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the UPA virtual conference series. This evening, we have Craig Brockman with us, the author of Dead of November. How does pondering make it all the way to publishing? Every author follows a different path. Whether you've been flailing away at a children's book, a book of poetry, or an unfinished novel, we will discuss some tools that may help you find your unique track and carry it over the finish line. Craig will be sharing the track he took when releasing Dead of November, a novel of Lake Superior, in the year 2020. Now, Craig Brockman has lived in the UP for nearly 20 years. When he was employed by the Indian Health Service, Lake Superior State University, and other facilities. In 2017, an article in the Ontonagon Herald chronicled the final 140-mile leg of his meandering 450-mile hike along the shores of Lake Superior, covering every step of the UP from Drummond Island Ferry Dock to DeTour Village, all the way to a sandbar at the mouth of the Montreal River on the Wisconsin border. Now that is a trip. Craig currently lives with his wife in Tecumseh, Michigan. In 2007, he also published Marty and the Far Woodchuck, a middle grade novel. You can learn more about him at craigbrockman.com. All right, Craig, next slide, please. All right, Craig is just the first speaker in our 2021 lineup. We have a lot of great things coming, especially designed for educating authors and helping them improve their craft. Next month will be Debbie Frontiera with Describing Your World, Maximizing the Role of Setting. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody at that one. Next, please. We also sponsor the UP Notable Book Club virtual meetups. Now, these are all special events with the authors who are the winners of the UP Notable Book Club Award for 2020. And coming up on February 11th, we'll have Phil Belfi, the author of Three Fires Unity, which is a really fascinating story of 400 years of the Indian in the Great Lakes area. All right, Craig, I'll turn it over to you for the rest of the presentation.
Great. Well, I'm really glad to see everybody here. Hope you can hear me okay. Yeah, I had given this talk one time before locally, and geared kind of toward people who are brand new, maybe brand new to the world, but I think that it also might spark some interest in other people who've been hanging around for a while. And I know with the our audience that we see gathered here today, there's definitely people here who have more expertise in some of these areas than I do. And I sure hope that we get a chance to have some discussion. I plan this to last for about 40 minutes, maybe 45. I think we'll have a little time during it too, so you can kick in some ideas as I cross them, and it spurs some interest for you. And then I hope we have some time just for open discussion at the end, because the goal is really to help people get to the finish line if they're thinking about whether it's a children's book. Some people like to do picture books, poetry books, a novel, a nonfiction book, whatever it is. The biggest hurdle for a lot of new authors, I think, is finishing. And so that's really what I want to focus on. And all I can do is tell you what my experience has been. And hopefully you can get a couple of nuggets of knowledge from that experience. I think everybody's primary idea is to get to that point where you get that box of books. You know, it's really an exciting idea and something that you hold in your brain the whole time that you're going through your writing. And it's just the smell of the ink, cracking open the box and everything else. It's just really a feeling of exhilaration. And I think it's, I think probably I'm more like the camel, and my wife is like the little girl saying, "Yay, I don't have to listen to him talk about that book anymore for a long time." And it is exhilarating to get to that finish line, whether it's a small project or a big project. You want to have that feeling of exhilaration, even with your small goals. We're going to talk about kind of hit on a few things. I think we're going to fly through this kind of quickly. And I'm going to hit mostly the high spots, but I hope I don't move too fast to miss anything that is important. But again, I'm relating pretty much what was my experience, what I went through, and all the mistakes that I made, and plodding through it for too long when I probably could have finished in a lot shorter time if I'd just known a few other techniques for finishing. So that's where we're at. A little bit about me. I was a family nurse practitioner with Indian Health Service for a long time up in the UP. That big hairy guy that looks like a bear, I think the native people captured him and made him a nurse practitioner for a few years. That used to be me working. On the lower, I have a lot of hobbies. I make little fanciful dioramas, and then those are a display I had at the local library. Those are my kids' houses where they live, and I made little models of those. I do a lot of carpentry outdoors. Those are a couple of my sheds and my lattice work that I do outside. And musician. I was a Christian musician, music writer for a long time, and my music's all on Spotify, iTunes, any place you want to go for that. But I haven't actually done that for a long time. My son is a music producer, and he helped me finally archive all that stuff and get it together in a batch. So that's another one of my interests is music. I published Dead in November 2020 in March, just at a perfect time to publish, just as the pandemic.
Have we lost the audio?
Yeah, I'm not hearing anything. It could be Craig is frozen. I think
So
maybe
he
his
looks-
internet connection dropped. Yep, he dropped. No,
Nope,
Oh, there he
he's
is.
back.
Craig, can you hear us? Raise your hand if you can, because we can't hear you. Yeah, we're not hearing you.
He's muted.
Oh, shoot, how did that happen? Ask to unmute. Must have been a stray mouse click somewhere.
Can you hear me now?
I hear somebody now.
I'm all back. So
Okay.
Yes.
I hope it wasn't me.
I don't know. I have a great network here. I've never been dropped before, but I'll take responsibility for this one. So I'll keep going. See where I'm at. Oh, and the other one was it was really a pioneering time in 2007 to write a book, to try to self-publish. I did it with Lulu, and 13 or 14 years ago, I did all the formatting, uploaded everything, artwork, everything was, you had to do it yourself. Now it's self-publishing has come so far since that time. And the other one is just the article after I finished my 140 leg of that hike. So that's my bio. My life was interrupted there for a little bit, my bio. So back to the craft of writing. I think a few years ago, I was in a creative writing class in a local college here, and the teacher really talked to us about the imposter syndrome. I think every professional kind of is aware of that concept, where you're afraid that someday someone's going to discover that you really aren't as good as you think that you are. And whether you're in a medical profession or an artistic profession or in sales or business, you kind of carry with you that idea of maybe somebody's going to discover that I'm a fraud, that I'm an imposter. But I think that as a writer, you have to overcome that and start calling yourself a writer. And I think particularly for young writers or new fledgling writers, that's kind of a big hurdle to overcome, where you actually start calling yourself a writer and where you begin to work like a writer and write like a writer. Because there's some cool perks that come with writing. I love to take writing retreats. And the one on the left is my daughter's property up north of Petoskey, where she's got, there's an old Amish barn. I love to go there and write. The one on the top, there's a Orthodox Romanian monastery that's about 15 minutes from our house here, and they'll let you stay there. And that's an awesome place to get away to write. And I always am looking for Airbnb cottages. The one on the bottom was an Airbnb cottage where I stole away to write for a while. So one of the perks of writing is that you can claim that you're going on writing retreats and spend time away. And I genuinely do get some writing done when I'm on those retreats. But one of the perks of calling yourself a writer. But most days, this is where I'm at. On the right is my iPad with my $25 Logitech Bluetooth keyboard. That's what I do all my work on. I'll explain that a little bit later. And then the rest of the time is just a mess of notes and other junk while I'm looking out the window watching the bird feeder. So I think as far as the craft of writing, about all I can say is that for me personally, goals and lists create my discipline, no matter how tiny the list is, whether it's to write so-and-so a letter, do this piece of research, finish chapter 5, upload such and such. I have to write those in lists, and that's really how I get things done. And then I set general goals, say I want to get this book done by 2022 or something like that, so that I'm always headed in a direction. I think that that's critical for someone that's trying to tackle a big project like a book. And again, whether it's a children's book or a book of poetry, or whether it's a novel or nonfiction, it's kind of the same principles. The craft of writing involves a lot of writing. I think you just have to keep writing and writing. And for me, I think when I started out, I thought I really want to become more accomplished in a short period of time. And that's why I took creative writing classes and stuff. But writing is an evolution. And I know that there's people that are in this group now that have a lot more experience, a lot longer as writers than me. And even I'm sure you would admit that your writing continues to evolve even after you've been writing for decades. So, excuse me. I think that I want to talk a little bit, if you're going to have the craft of writing, then you want to hone your craft no matter what you do. And there are certain tools and resources that make your writing better. One of the tools I think that is kind of popular is Scrivener. Maybe a lot of you have heard of Scrivener. I like, this is a screenshot of Scrivener on my iPad. There's an example of how I had my chapter set up for Dead of November, which initially I called Superior Ghost Story. But Scrivener is kind of cool because it lays it out all into these, each chapter is like a file, and then you can write, and if you want to move this chapter up above that one because it works better, you can just move it in Scrivener. The other thing, if you're a 3x5 card corkboard kind of person, in Scrivener you can create corkboards with all your 3x5 cards on it and arrange them and write it. I find Scrivener is a pretty steep learning curve, and I probably only use about 10% of what it's capable of doing. And the thing for me is that I write the whole book. Right now I'm just finishing another book. It's called Curve of the Earth, which is about what if Lazarus, in the Bible, what if Lazarus didn't die again after he was raised from the dead? It just seemed wrong that he'd have to go through death again after being raised. So I'm just wrapping this book up this year. And but I use Scrivener in that one too, where I laid out all the chapters. And then after I get the first draft or two done, then the thing that's cool about Scrivener is you just push a couple of buttons and it formats your manuscript for you. You can you can create a whole manuscript with just a couple of clicks. And whatever format or however you want that manuscript, it will write that in a couple of clicks, and then I transfer it over into Word. This is Word on iPad. I love using Word on iPad because I can use split screen on iPad, and on the left I can do my research. I can have the, I guess that's this is left because I'm in the mirror image, because then you can mirror, you can look up words, you know, you have your thesaurus sitting there. If you have to do a little bit of research, you can do it in that split screen at the same time, looking at maps and stuff like that. The book I'm working on now, Curve of the Earth, takes place in the first few centuries of the first millennia. So it's just tons of research and rechecking and looking for names and creating names and that kind of stuff. So I was using that split screen function with the iPad all the time. So again, I'm just talking about how I do it. Everybody has different approaches to their writing and things that they become familiar with too. Of course, there's resources when you're honing that craft of writing. I think everybody pretty much is familiar with Bird by Bird. It's just, for me, it's the Bible of writing. My whole world of writing and the way I looked at writing changed after I read Bird by Anne Lamott. It's hilarious. It's like belly laughs funny to get through, but she's also brilliant in the way that she approaches writing. And the 90-Day Novel by Alan Watt is really cool. Like he says, unlock the story within. For this book I'm writing now, I literally got through my first draft in 90 days with that help. I never thought that was possible because it took me about 3 years to get through the first draft of Dead in November. And with this one is a longer book, but I got through the first draft in 90 days. I'm going to say that Anne Lamott says that you want to get that crappy first draft out, but she uses a word other than crappy. But to get that first draft out with a 90-day novel, you get that first draft out in 90 days. And then, of course, there's all the old standards like Strunk and White. And I'm sure anybody here could give me another half dozen or dozen of the old standards that are good standbys to have. So those are the resources when you're developing that craft of writing and you're honing your craft. I recommend a conference a year. It's so cool. Look at us right now on Zoom, being able to participate like that. It's so much easier to pick up a conference or two a year because almost all conferences now are Zoom conferences are online. And so it saves you hotel costs and travel expenses and everything else. And you still get a lot of the benefits. It's not as good as person to person. I think we were in the conference or the, what was the one that we had in, was it in fall? Late through UPPAA. And it was a great conference, but again, you just missed that person to person connection. Also, we like, there's so many ways to connect on Facebook that where we don't have to get out and meet in person. Of course, we have, these are screenshots from a few different groups that I'm part of. Of course, UPPAA on Facebook, Michigan authors. All of these are in the bibliography that's posted on UPPAA with this conference. I wrote all the book, any book I mention, any website that I mentioned is going to be in that bibliography that's going to be posted on UPPAA or is posted on UPPAA. But anyway, Michigan Authors is a great authors group. They post a lot of conferences and other things going on for authors. It's a good bunch of Michigan writers that are part of that. Written in the Mitten is fun. Inger Rudhelm, if you know him at all, he's just a tireless promoter, and he's fun to listen to. He just he probably posts several times a day, and he is all over the state looking for every book fair or anything else where you, and any other strategy to promote yourself as a self-publisher. And the other one way over on the right is the Great Lakes Association of Horror Writers, which I joined just because I think it's $25 a year, and I joined it just because of my ghost book. And it's a fun group though, because they do stuff like Zoom watch horror movies together, and they have a lot of online events, and they're real kind of hands-on, and they really kind of mastered the Zoom and online media in order to stay in touch. Plus they have a lot of mailings and that too. And they cover a big area through Chicago, Minneapolis, and there's people from all over the Great Lakes region that are part of that group. So I like that group, and it's fun to be part of it. Even though I may not write another horror book, it's still a good group to be part of. Of course, there's our group, I can't say enough about UPPAA. I owe so much to this group as far as connections and to be able to keep the spirit of the UP in my writing and in my thinking. I think it's indispensable, and I try to sell it wherever I can, because it's such a personable, hands-on group that is like none other that I've seen. So kudos to the UPPAA. The other one is just writing group, a word on writing groups and circles. I don't have much to say. I'm not part of one. Other people may have had different experiences with that. From a lot of people, I hear that it's a good idea if you pick people that are similar in your group, similar to your achievement level, because writing groups tend to gravitate to the lowest common denominator, and you may get dragged down if you're spending too much time on people that are at different levels of accomplishment. And I think the other thing with writing groups is that they stay small, 3 to 5, maybe 6 people, because you're getting so much content sometimes that it's hard to keep up. And again, I'm just talking about input that I've had from other authors, and maybe other people have had other experiences with writing groups. And if you want to kick in, feel free to mention that too as we go along. So I think we can kind of move through some of this. How do I write a book? How do you write a book? It's really up to you, something that you have to discover in yourself. And I think that no matter what you're doing, every project starts with a what if. And I thought of, whether it's a novel, whether it's a children's book, whether it's a book of poetry, whatever you're talking about, it's sort of that what if, I think, is an important question to ask yourself. And for me, it was like, what if ghosts, I was standing along Lake Superior one day and I thought, what if there's some woman sitting out there on that rock and she sits there the whole time that we're around here swimming, wouldn't that be spooky? And if you're around Lake Superior very much, there's some really spooky stuff that happens when you're around Lake Superior. And I just thought, I just got to write a ghost story about this place. And so I thought the what it was. Now my book about Lazarus, it's what if Lazarus was raised from the dead, but he never died again. So whatever you're starting with, it starts with what if, and then it kind of leaves the box. And sometimes I feel like I'm that big red brown bird stuck in the box and can't get out, instead of the little kitten that leaves the box. Leaves the box, I mean, you're using your imagination, you're letting it run wild. You're taking that what if as far as you can, and just casting a huge loop to see what you can include in that what if. And that's when writing is fun. And again, I think that can even apply to non-fiction sometimes. Toni Morrison wrote, if there's a book you really want to read, but it hasn't been seen yet, then you must write it. And I think that is so true. You know yourself how many times you're on Goodreads or Amazon, or you're walking through the library, your fingers on all these books, and it's just like, oh, I wish I could just find the right book, a police story with a paranormal angle, or a romantic book that has space aliens. There's so many times you want just that right kind of book, but you can't find it. Well, that might be an indication that that's the book that maybe you need to write. Or again, you're reading a book to your kids or grandkids, you're just thinking, well, why don't they write a book about this? Well, that may be an indication that that's the children's book that you should be working on then. So I think a lot of authors start at that point and then they move on from there. How can I write a book? How can anybody write a book? All of us have heard probably of the pantsers or the plotters. There's the people who are right by the seat of their pants. I think of Stephen King as a famous pantser, who just basically starts writing and then he just lays out the whole story as he goes along. And then there's the plotters, they're the people that write endless outlines, pages of outlines before they start their work. I'm probably in between, mostly a pantser. Ending. I probably like to start with an ending and then come up with the beginning, and then the middle is the arch between those two. But there's a lot of different ways to approach it, not necessarily in that order. For me, again, all I can do is share what my experience has been. I like a one-page outline and keep it to one page. The 90-day novel uses 3 acts, and it explains how the arc of those 3 acts kind of works. And I think it's kind of a neat way to write a novel. But I stick to a one-page outline. For this book I'm writing now, and also for Dead in November, I just started out with a bunch of what I call vignettes, and writers usually call these scenes. And I just thought, what are some things I want to see if I'm writing a ghost story about Lake Superior? I want to have somebody in a cabin, you know. And so I wrote a chapter, I wrote a scene, a vignette about somebody seeing a ghost in a cabin. And then I wrote, you know, I thought, what if there's, you know, in my book Dead in November, there's an old infirmary there, and a lot of people don't know that infirmary, it actually sits in Sault Ste. Marie. And there's actually the infirmary from Fort Brady is actually an apartment house. I think probably the people who live in the apartments don't even know that used to be the old infirmary for Fort Brady. And I thought it was a really spooky place, so I included it in my book, and I wrote a vignette about what it would be like to be in that old infirmary. And so I started to write those vignettes, and I laid them out, and I suddenly realized that those are my chapters. And I just strung them together and began to write other scenes that would string those together. And once I got to that point, the writing Dead in November went really fast. And I did that for the book I'm writing currently too. I wrote several scenes that actually became the chapters of the book, and they kind of were the stakes, the posts that I could plant and string the rest of the fence along those posts. So I like to write, if you got something in your head, you think you have an idea for a book, write some vignettes and some scenes that color that, and then all of a sudden that might really spur your, get the plot rolling. This 90-day novel, like I said, it's unlocked the story within, and that really works on starting at the beginning and writing right through. You know, don't worry about crafting, don't worry about being cool, being neat, and your good spelling and having your commas all in the right place. You just write that sucker out, and then you go back and you change it in the subsequent drafts. But you have to get that story out of you. Alan Watt is real big about unlocking the story within, and that, to me, I was kind of skeptical. But with this book that I'm writing now, it was amazing how much of the story was already inside of me and already just developed. There's a reason why you're gravitated toward one story or gravitated toward a project like a children's book or even a book of poetry. You have to unlock that and let that flow. A couple of things that Alan Watt says that really got me. He said, we must be willing to let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the life that's waiting for us. And he was just talking about the protagonist in the book, you know, that comes a point where the protagonist has to let go of what they have planned so as to accept what's actually happening to them. And there's things like that where you just kind of stop and say, whoa, that kind of applies to me. You know, I've got a point where I have to let go of what I planned in order to accept what's actually happening to me. And you realize that this novel or this thing that you're writing is actually you know, it's actually coming out of you for a reason. It says, we do not try to control the world of our story. Our characters will resent us. I'm sorry, I can't see it because I'm behind the pictures. We do not try to control the world of our story. Our characters will resent us, and our imagination will pick up its ball and go home. So he has just a lot of really cool things like that in order that he has within the course of the book. And you probably learn more about yourself than you do about writing, going through the 90-day novel. So you have your first draft, you write it from beginning to end, boom, and then you have your second draft, which you kind of build onto the bones. Again, I'm talking about the way I do it. And I think it's almost like an artist, that the first draft is the outline, is the sketch. The second draft, you begin to paint in the lines and build the bones. And then the next draft, you're layering on the plot, the prose, and the substance. Michael Lee, oops, again, I can't see. The first draft reveals the art and the revision reveals the artist. I think that's cool quote, because the revisions are really where where the artist comes out, and you begin to color in your characters and your plot and the scenes, and you insert things like smells and mannerisms, and that those are things that are coming out in the second and subsequent drafts. For your rewrites, just to focus on that a little bit more, everybody's different. I like to do the entire manuscript over and over so that I see it as a cohesive whole. I'm about on the 7th rewrite now in the book I'm on now. I think I did 8 or more on Dead in November. And I like doing that. To me, that's the fun part, is doing the rewrites. There's people that talk about doing 2 rewrites. It's kind of like, yeah, right. Like, how is that even possible unless you've been writing for 100 years? It's like you write a first draft and then you come back and you rewrite the whole thing in the second draft and have it perfect. And I still don't believe it. And then there's other people who write chapter by chapter. They rewrite chapter by chapter, where you take one chapter and you get that perfect, and then you move on to the next chapter and get that perfect. I don't see that as a cohesive whole, but whatever works for each person. Some people just focus on problem chapters and that you have set out within your book and then build outward. If you've ever read Don DeLillo, he writes kind of like a patchwork quilt, almost an abstract writer. And like, there's his book Underworld, which is a long book, hundreds of pages, but it's like you're reading all these little vignettes, all these little scenes, one upon the other for hundreds of pages. And then amazingly, he just weaves them all together, and it takes your breath away, the way that he's able to pull all these little strings together into a cohesive book. And it's an excellent read. But it all depends on how you approach things, how you do big projects. How do you finish these big projects? And I say you apply the same skills that you use for any other big project. And what does that mean? My wife said to tell you that this is not our garage, and it may have been at one time, but it's currently not. As everybody looks at this, think about, what are you going to do first? And we've all faced this kind of dilemma, whether it's a basement or a garage. And every one of us would look at this, and I really like the scrap wood over in the corner. I'll probably start picking that up first and getting that in order. Definitely get that big branch out of the way. Some people think they put away the power tools. Everybody's, or otherwise you could just grab the door and pull it down and forget about it. But everybody has a different way of doing things like this. And so really, to finish a big project, you have to think about, how do you manage things like this? Bird by bird, the idea in Bird by Bird to finish, she was sitting at a table with her, I think her younger brother. They were doing homework, and Lamont, when they're kids, and her brother was crying and worrying because he had to do this huge project on all the birds of North America. And he's just so stressed out because this thing was due the next day or something. And he cried to his dad, how do I finish this? And his dad said, bird by bird. One bird, you take one bird in North America, and then you take the next bird and the next bird. And that's the whole idea of how we get this done, is it's small, measurable goals, small lists. I think they're indispensable to creating discipline. So, and with whatever these projects are, I think ultimately think years and not weeks. If you get stressed out because you're not getting things done, you realize that writing a book may take years and not weeks or months. I love these next 2 quotes are ones I gathered from forums that I was looking at, writing forums. And the first one, a kid was saying, I have 7,500 pages. Is it time for me to find an editor for my novel? 7,500 words. He said, is it time for me to find an editor for my novel? And, a few of us kind of kicked in, and it was kind of like, well, I think he probably should be thinking about 90 to 100,000 words, because he was saying he's got all these characters and all these things are going together. And he said, maybe an editor would help me sort this all out. And it was kind of like, No, I think you probably have about another 90,000 words that you have to get through. And in the course of the forum, I just said, how did you finish other big things? Did you ever get a degree? Did you ever build something, or how did you graduate from high school? And he said, I never completed anything before. And to me, that kind of blew me away. And I said, well, where do you start? You have to be able to have some reference to something that you completed at one time. You have to figure out how to complete things. The other one kind of caught me too, was from a forum. A woman was writing, and she said, well, I'm trudging through my second draft. And that one really threw me for a loop. And I thought, man, if you're trudging through your second draft, can you imagine what your writers or your readers are going to feel like? If you're trudging through a draft, I'm thinking that you probably should just can it, because if you don't enjoy what you're writing, then probably your readers aren't going to enjoy it either. I enjoy my first draft. I enjoy like I said, I enjoy my seventh draft, because it's still fun and I'm interested in the thing that I'm writing. If I didn't, I would think, I know I've had a couple of short stories that I did not enjoy the second and third drafts. And so I just canned them, I laid them aside. Maybe they'll be good on another day. But when I get to that point where I'm not enjoying it, I know for a fact that my readers are not going to enjoy it either. So let's get back on our outline here. I think I'm talking a little bit about readers. And does anybody else have anything to say? We still have a little time yet. I'm coming in for landing here, not too long, but I don't know if somebody's just champing the bit to kick something in. So no, I'll bring it in for a landing then, and we can continue. Alpha readers, I like. We all love our alpha readers. Probably we love them because they're family members or people who are close to us. You ask those first readers to be brutally honest, and they almost never are, except for my wife, who reads like 2 books a week, and she has a BS detector as a reader like I've never seen. She knows when something that's being written isn't on track, and she picks it up. And I have 1 or 2 other people that are kind of like that. With the book I'm writing now, I've seen advice where it says hide your flame and no one should see it too soon. No one should see what you're writing too soon. I really agree with that. I got through 2 or 3 drafts of the book I'm writing now without letting anybody else see it. And it was a much better experience for the readers to be able to see the whole thing rather than having been fed little bits of it along the way. And it's also a lot more exciting as a writer to be able to be hiding this flame for all this while and then being able to just reveal it and say, hey, look at what I did. You want to read it? Usually then I'll give it a rest for a couple of weeks or just lay it aside for a couple of months and let it ferment, and then come back to it and look at it again, whether it's a short story or essay or whatever. I like to let it sit for a while because I always change it when I come back. Then we have beta readers, which are kind of people that you bring on track after you have a pretty good draft or a couple of drafts. You ask them to be brutally honest. With this book, I'm just getting my manuscripts back from my beta readers. I had about 5. I think I'll have about 7 beta readers for this one total. And for this one, I think I actually made an outline for what I want each beta reader to look for me. And mostly I'm telling them, don't look at grammar, don't look at spelling. That's not what a beta reader does. Look for continuity. Look for places where a character is not consistent. I had a woman that was a beta reader in this book. Lazarus has to learn a lot of different languages as he's moving through life. And I have one woman who's a local librarian who is from Germany and speaks multiple languages. And I had her focus on how Lazarus does languages as he moves through life. And also she's traveled extensively, so she could give me a lot better insights into some of the locations that I used. So I gave assignments to my beta readers for specific things to look for, and that's been really helpful. And I've gotten so much better input back from beta readers on this book. I got excellent input on Dead in November. I had a few native people that read it for me because it has native lore in it, and a lot of other people. So my beta readers, can't imagine writing anything without beta readers. And if you have a good team of beta readers who are brutally honest, and you can't have a thin skin, they're the most helpful people, I think, in the whole process. I'm going to talk a little bit about editors and formatters, but first let me just mention agents. I don't have an agent. One of the mistakes I made is that when I started to look for agents for Dead in November, I didn't have a finished professionally edited product. I had a good letter, I had a good approach. I didn't have a platform, I didn't have a website, I didn't have any of the things that agents were looking for at that point. And that was my mistake. That was, I was green, still am. But before you're looking for an agent, you want a finished, professionally edited product. In the presentation page at UPPAA, there's an example of the query letter that I used for agents. I would say cast a huge net, start with a few. I started with 5, I think, agents, and then I spread out to 10, and then I think I ultimately did about 30 or 35. And I kept notes on and spreadsheets, and I still have those on every agent, how they responded to me, what kind of materials they asked for and follow up, so that with this book I'm writing now, I can go back to, because almost all of them leave an open door and they say, if you have something else, send it to us, but this one just didn't work for me. But if they, I think that's just kind of standard thing they're going to say, but at least you have that little open door, and then you can send something to them again after that. These 2 books I think are invaluable if you're thinking about getting an agent, Guide to Literary Agents, and then Jeff Herman's Guide to Book Publishers, Editors, and Literary Agents is invaluable because he actually interviews agents, and then they'll tell him, what are they looking for? Who are the really, what are personality traits that really suck when it comes to writers that they hate? What are things that they're looking for in the query letters? Plus it tells you how to write good query letters and what's the best way to approach agents. Guide to Literary Agents will get you there, but I think the Guide to Book Publishers, Editors, and Literary Agents is a little more meatier as far as I'm concerned. So also they use websites. Again, all these books and websites are on the bibliography that's posted. You have manuscriptwishlist.com, which is an agent site. Querymanager.com is a good place to look for agents and what they actually will post on these sites. The agents will post what they're looking for at that particular week, and how to query them, and what kind of materials to send when you're querying them. So those are all places to go agent hunting if you're in that process. Anything else anybody has to kick in? If you're going to self-publish, yes, go ahead.
I liked your thing about lists. I'm a list person, and I have my to-do list almost every day. And to me, there's something very satisfying about crossing things off your list. And then when you look at it at the end of the day, you can brag about what you accomplished.
Yeah, I know. I'm the same way. I have a friend that does some kind of psychology background and stuff, and he says that the true test of OCD is if you actually have finished something and then you add it onto your list and cross it out. And I admit that I've done that before. It's just that satisfaction. It's something I hadn't expected to do it, but it's done. So I'll put it on my list and cross it out just to get the satisfaction of having finished it. So I just find, for me, it really is helps them finish stuff. So.
Greg, I have a question for you regarding contacting publishers versus agents, and especially something that's more regional interest versus commercial, or
Yeah, everything I've read basically said don't bother, and I think that you're going, I could be completely wrong on that. And I think I looked at regional publishers first, and I, just because Dead of November has so much regional interest, you know, I thought it's a natural, but there, especially for me, because I didn't have a history other than my middle grade book years ago. I didn't have the resume, I think, to approach publishers. And everything I heard, and I in this group, there's people who have a lot more experience than I do, but said basically don't waste your time. That publishers aren't going to read anything. It's going to end up on their slush pile, and unless you have an agent to sell it, it's probably not worth it. And I could be wrong with that. So, but pretty much, I think, and I think the agent is the route to go. But I'm green, so that's my guess. So, anybody else? Just a little bit on self-publishing. I think digital, no better time to enter the 21st century than now. I think you're going to have to, I can't say you're going to have to, but it sure helps if you learn how to be tech savvy. And even if it means taking some classes, devoting a year or two to learn how to become a little more tech savvy is going to be worth your time if you're going to self-publish. Don't, how would I say it? Don't be discouraged by self-publishing versus being professionally published widely. I think self-publishing is really going to be the crest of the future. I know my son is a music producer. That's how he makes his living. Right now in music, 40% of all music published is done by indie, self-published. If you're listening to music, about 40% of the music that you're listening to is indie based. The big companies, music companies, aren't there. He's an independent publisher who does well, and with the artists that he works with, and that's pretty much the wave of music is self-publishing. And I think book publishing has always lagged music publishing by a bit, and I think that self-publishing is going to be a wave of the future once self-publishers begin to probably form more conglomerations and things like that, where they can actually improve the quality of their book, and they can attest to the quality of their self-published books. That's been the difficulty, and certainly is the difficulty getting into bookstores and things like that. So self-publishing, I think, is the wave of the future, and I think it's a good thing for authors to become savvy in how to self-publish and where to go. These self-publishing sites will do it for you. I used Lulu for my book in 2007, and I know that Lulu's come a long way and is a good self-publisher as far as I know. But all of these are going to be expensive. The more you can do yourself, the cheaper. I think, again, that was 13 years ago, but I think for my book to be up and published myself was probably about $250 for the whole process, you know, but I didn't have an editor in that for that process. But I know that they can be really inexpensive if you can do a lot of the work yourself. KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, really the gold standard of publishing. That's Amazon. Amazon started out as booksellers in the 90s, and nobody does it better than Amazon. Despite everybody wanting to choke on the idea of Amazon, if you want your book sold, I just am afraid it's going to have to be through KDP these days, unless you want to really do a lot of work yourself. As a self-publisher, I can't imagine the amount of shoe leather you're going to wear out if you're not publishing on KDP. So just my 2 cents. There's Tyler's Superior Book Productions. That's what I used for editing and formatting my book. Tyler did an excellent job of editing. It was a great process. I learned a lot through it. I can't say enough about Tyler's competence as an editor. I think your whole cost to self-publish, I think for a novel, you're going to have to think about $2,000 to $3,000 by the time you get a case of books in your house, depending on what there's certainly ways you can cut the cost, but that's kind of a round number. And no matter what you do, You have to be hands-on. I don't think you can just hand your book over to an editor or a formatter or an artist and say, make me a book cover, edit my novel and then just sit back and let it happen. You're going to have to be involved because the editor doesn't know your world, doesn't know the world that you're writing from. There may be things that the editor doesn't see the same way that you do, and you may not want to change everything that the editor suggests that you change. Same with your book cover. I worked hard to get my book cover just the way I wanted it, and working with Larry was really good because he's a good graphic artist and was able to help me get the book cover that I really wanted in the way that I wanted it to look. And you have to work with these people hands-on. And if you're writing a children's book, you're dealing with artists and other people like that. You can't just hand something over to them and then cross your fingers and hope that you get the product that you want. You're not going to get the product that you want. And even if it's Lulu or other self-publishing formats, KDP, you're going to have to work with that through the process, get your galleys, get your first run books back, look them over, and be sure that it's actually what you want. I use, of course, ISBN numbers, Library of Congress numbers are things you're going to need as a self-publisher. You go to Bowker for that. Be sure you own your numbers. That's my suggestion. Don't let a self-publishing company own your numbers, those ISBN numbers. You want to keep them for yourself. There's always a possibility that an agent or somebody else will pick you up someday. Or if you want to put your book in Ingram so bookstores can get it, then you're going to want to own your numbers as time goes by. And there, every week, another fly-by-night publisher shows up. And if you're on Facebook for more than 15 minutes, you're going to get accosted by several fly-by-night publishers and people who will gladly say that they're publishing your book for you for a couple $1,000s, and basically you have a clunker that sits there and does nothing. So do your homework when you're coming to that point. Cost marketing, just a few words on that. Always count the cost of marketing. I'm not that concerned about making money at this because I know I'm not going to make a lot of money at it, but I sure as heck don't want to lose money. You can lose money awfully fast when you're thinking of marketing. If you spend $100 on marketing, you're going to have to sell 20 books, 10 or 20 books at minimum in order to make that up. If you're spending $1,000 on marketing, whatever you spent it on had better sell you 200 or 400 books. Otherwise, you threw your money away. And like Carol Howard Johnson mentioned, don't pay for reviews. I just was in on a forum where everybody was talking about how wonderful it is to pay $350 for reviews or more. And you realize how many books you have to sell. Is that review really going to sell you 400 books or 300 books? It's not likely. If you do your homework, make your connections, you can get some pretty decent reviews for any book. And I know that most of us can pick up on the fake reviews or the purchased reviews when we see them on an author's site. So I think Carol Howard Johnson's advice not to pay for reviews, it's debatable, but I think it's good advice overall. I'll just kind of work through some of this quickly. Web page, I used Wix for my website. It took me it's an awesome website. It probably took me an hour and a half from beginning to end to set the whole thing up. And I was able to put my music on there, a bio, I have different pages that, like even for an event like this, I can post that. When I published in UP Reader, I can post that on my website. So I think for a writer, it's really invaluable to have a website. Little bit of printed material. The one on the left is actually from an editor that I met a couple of years ago at a conference in Indiana, I think. Just kind of a little handout, 10 tips for writer from an editor. I used a business card, and probably the most valuable piece of printed material I made was that little business card that had my book cover on the front and it urged people to make an Amazon review. I think I got a bunch of reviews just from that. I put one of those cards in every book that I sell out of my home, or that I ship out of my home. And I had that made at Staples, I think, maybe $15 for 250 cards. You know, I just did it myself at home and uploaded and went to Amazon and picked it up, or they would have sent it to my home. They're so cheap. If you just take a little time getting the graphic down, they make a cool bookmark. And also you got instant marketing for 15 bucks. I only had to sell 3 books in order to cover the cost of that one.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And that press release, there's actually on our, the UPP website, there's a copy of the press release that I used for the local newspaper. I think I sold more books through that than I have by having that than I've sold through all the bookstores in Michigan. I got fan mail from Texas, you know, people who've left. That was just the Tecumseh paper, but people who had moved away from Tecumseh and were interested in the book and bought the book. And I was amazed at how much just having a little article in the local paper did for my sales and getting my name out there. I put books in 2 gift shops. I actually am not a huge fan. Here's where I'm going to blaspheme right now. I'm not a huge fan of bookstores. And nobody is supposed to ever say that. I used to like going through video stores and looking at all the videos when I rented a movie and stuff. And I think that I haven't actually been in a bookstore in many years, but I used to kind of like going through bookstores and looking at books and stuff like that. But I think for the amount of effort, I put a lot of effort into getting my book into bookstores and sending sell sheets and, you know, 10 or 15 books I sent to bookstores and follow-up phone calls and stuff like that. But bookstores are not tremendously interested in self-published authors, but I have 2 gift shops that are nearby that have sold so many books for me. Just because I'm local, I can go there and say hi. I can drop off the books, and they love the product, you know, and they feature it. And I feature their gift shop on my Facebook. And I have that relationship with it. And you almost have to be able to live near. I don't have a bookstore here in Tecumseh, and so I've kind of fostered these 2 gift shops, and they took on my book, and it's been fantastic, you know. And I would recommend just developing relationships like that. And if you're going to do that with every bookstore in Michigan, there aren't enough hours in the week in order to keep massaging and keeping the bookstores satisfied. And like I said, I've sold dozens times more books on Amazon than I've sold in all the bookstores in Michigan. And I put 1/100th the time into Amazon that I put into all the bookstores in Michigan. So sorry, but I think they're kind of gone the way of video rental places and maybe record shops that are still kind of charming anachronisms. But man, I have a hard time seeing returns on the effort they have to put in unless you have one. Like I know Marquette has an excellent bookstore, Sault Ste. Marie has an excellent bookstore. And if you're close enough to be able to pump them, then I think that you're going to be profitable. But now I'm going to be officially excommunicated from writing for those words, I think. So I keep I also recommend creating a business. Pretty easy to do. You just need a DBA. I think doing business as number cost me $10 at the county office. And then I can do write-offs, keep tabs of my income and my expenses, and you get tax breaks for writing. And as long as I'm profitable, which this year I will be, and it's kind of cool. It looks professional. I've designed my own little logo, Curb the Earth Publishing, and I use that for my letterhead and everything else. And so I think it gives you, especially if you're dealing with some bookstores and dealing with people that you're trying to get to pick up your book, dealing with agents, that little tiny investment of creating a business is indispensable. We did it. We made it to the end. So this is a place, last summer I was down in West Virginia. We did an Airbnb at and this was one of my little writing retreats, sitting by this pasture at about 95 degrees outside, writing in the shade. It was awesome. It's the first time I'd ever been to West Virginia. and it was as beautiful as John Denver sang that it was. So, and really enjoyed it. So I hope people have other things. These are the, this is my bibliography, which is posted on UPPAA. This is the query letter. There is my sell sheet that I sent to bookstores, etc. There's an example of what a sell sheet should look like. And there's an example of what my press release looked like that I sent to the local ones. Those are all materials that are on the UPPA website on this conference site. Only a few minutes late. How we doing?
You're doing great, Craig. I just want to tell you, you're not alone, and I can no longer go into a bookstore because I've had so many bad experiences trying to sell books there.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm always afraid to say that because I know how, with what reverence people behold bookstores, and I appreciate that. I personally, I haven't read a paper book in years. I read everything electronically, but my wife won't touch electronic books, even though she reads a couple books. And I appreciate people loving that touch and the feel of real books. There's no problem with that. It's just, for me, I'm an ebook person, and I subscribe to Scribd. That's how I get pretty much all the content. If I can't find an ebook, I pretty much don't read it. But bookstores have been frustrating for me, and no matter how much I massage them, and I think I have a good product that should sell in UP bookstores and in Michigan, and some bookstores have snapped it up and done well with it. And like I said, these local gift shops have really done well with it. But they've been I don't know, just grumpy and kind of difficult to deal with. That's all I can say. I don't know. As the profits just aren't there for the amount of work that I had to put into it, I just wrote it off and decided I'm not going to do that anymore. So sorry, but I'm sorry if there's any bookstore owners sitting here, but I just offended you deeply. So. Anybody else? I know that there's people sitting here that know more about this stuff than I do. So, and UPPAA is some like my second home. Yes, Maria.
Well, I have a very naive question, and maybe I know the answer, but I just want to confirm this or not. You've used the word indie. You've used the word self-publishing. Are they one and the same? And is one more positive to use versus the opposite?
Wow, that's a good question. That just occurred to me a couple days ago, and I think indie is the way to go. But what do you guys know about that?
Indie has better reputation. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just heard that a couple of days ago, and I thought of the same question. To stop using the term self-published and say indie publisher, because I know that that's the tag in music. You're an indie musician. Sounds a lot better than a self-published musician. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm a self-published singer-songwriter.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, that's what I am. So I know the feeling. Yeah, exactly. So.
And I guess I do have another little question. Has anyone gotten involved with Audible books recording?
Oh, have we? Brandy, do you want to take this one?
Why, yes. I am currently, I am recording for Audible as a narrator. I've in the process of recording all the UP readers. So UP Reader 4 and 1 should be, once it works its way through the system, coming out here soon. And most narrators on Audible are independent artists themselves. So if you are interested in audiobooks, contact me. I can, and you like how I sound over an iPad and whatnot. So like I've read Craig's story in the UP Reader 4, and that where he could listen to his own story and go, oh yeah. So it runs anywhere from starting at $50 per finished hour up. depending, you know, on various factors, but that's kind of what you want to figure on. And the Audible, I do believe when you upload it gives you an estimated time
Mhm.
once you upload your work, how many hours it will in fact take you. You have any specific audiobook question? Like,
I don't know if anyone is doing it or self-recording or, you know.
yeah, I am. I am literally sitting in my, let's see if you can see it,
Oh,
a
Where's the
recording
mic?
booth.
There we go.
There's
Oh,
Mike in my little independent studio. You know, and I can sit and edit, and it's magical, you know, soundproofed in here for the most part. And then, you know, and most people who record audiobooks are also the narrator and editor. So I edit the audio recording as well. I do have a background in audio and visual editing. Like I used to work in a recording studio and stuff like that. So it's not a new, I mean, audiobook narrating is fairly new to me. I just started last year, but recording and audio editing is not new to me. But most people are giving you a price on the actual reading of the book and the editing and producing of it. You don't have a we'll send the process usually is, you know, you can have people audition, and then you can pick someone, have a contract through ACX, which is Audible's audiobook production. It stands for uh, audio something exchange.
Probably
I'm drawing a
community. I don't know.
community exchange or something.
Mhm.
So they basically set up the thing to formatting and all of that. So all that's handled by your narrator or audio engineer. Um, and then you submit you can have someone give a audition, or you can say, oh, I really like Brandy, I want her to narrate my book. And then I'll record the first 15 minutes or so fully produced, upload it so you can hear it and go, okay, yeah, no, that's what I want. Or, ooh, I don't like how you have this kind of sound wrong of this isn't this happy. Everyone should sound more depressed, or everyone should sound happier, or, you know, whatever. But once you're past that first initial thing, then the narrator does the rest of the book, and then you get a chance to listen to it, make any suggestions or corrections once the full thing's uploaded. And then ACX approves it at a certain point, and then it's listed on Audible for download.
wow.
That's the short version of how it works.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
anything else you want?
iTunes as well. Yeah.
And yes, iTunes as well. Anything I'm forgetting there, Victor, in the process?
I'll just throw it in. It can be done even if you have no money. You can find artists who will do profit sharing where you get
Oh, yeah.
50% of the take. But it's a great investment, and it keeps on giving. Month after month, my audiobook sales have increased to the point where they're now about 20 to 25% of my print book sales,
wow.
which is great. And real, 70,000, 80,000 word novel, you can get it done for under 1,000 if you shop around. And then under the full price, the exclusive arrangement, which means that only Audible and iTunes can carry it, you get 40% cut. So if they price your audiobook version of your novel maybe almost as much as the novel itself, it could be $15, say, then you get 40% of $15, which is $6 on every one sold. So, I mean, it adds up. Now, that being said, you have to redo all your marketing process because what you're marketing in print isn't necessarily going to reach an audiobook audience. So, I mean, there's audiobook newsletters. You need to, work with them. So publicity can be a little tricky for audiobooks.
Has anyone tried it? Any of the authors here?
And I've got 50 audiobooks in print right now. So
I was gonna say, Michael, who's not here, I'm working on one of his books, and then who's next?
Raymond Luchek.
Yeah, Raymond Luchek is next as well. So they're both UPA members that are having books recorded.
Okay. Well, the only thing I just want to conclude by, for me, is saying Craig did a great job. I learned a lot from him too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. That was a really great overview. When I saw your slide deck, I'm like, there's no way he's going to get through this, but that was very well done.
Excellent, thanks. No, it was fun. It was fun. It's fun. Again, all I can do is tell you what I know, which is little, and I look at other people here that have a lot more experience than I do, but it was great to be able to join, and anything that I can do to contribute to UPPAA is a pleasure. This is such a good group.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up. We'll get this on YouTube. So everyone who couldn't make it here, I know it's a tough time for some people to get on, and we'll have it up there in perpetuity. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks for showing up, and be sure to tune in next time for Deb Frontieras. Going to tell us about the importance of locale and how it can make your book better.
Great. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you,